So Maxime Bernier is now traveling the Maritimes by car. Yeah. And I'm grateful that he's able to stop by and have this chat. Welcome, Maxime.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you and to have that opportunity.
Can you tell me, first of all, just vent. You're driving. You're the head of a national party that garnered almost 1 million votes, 6% of the popular vote, and yet you're relegated to driving from province to province. You can't even go to the island of Newfoundland.
Absolutely.
And luckily, PEI has a bridge. Yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't get on a boat there.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on the restrictions?
It is a nonsense. As you may know, and a lot of people know right now, that all that is not based on science. It's a pure punishment for people that didn't vote for Justin Trudeau. I believe that we are maybe 15 to 20% of the population in Canada that decided not to have the 2 shots. And I believe that Justin Trudeau did a lot of polling and survey, and he knows that we won't vote for him. So punishing us because we decided not to have an experimental medicine in our body, it's not a way a leader must act. You must be the Prime Minister for all Canadians, and that's not the case. That's pure discrimination and segregation. And I was very upset to see in the budget, in the last budget, that Justin Trudeau gave $37 million to Transport Canada to be sure that Transport Canada will enforce that restriction for unvaccinated Canadians. For us, we are not able to travel, as you know, by plane, by train, or by boat inside our own country. And Trudeau wants to be sure that Transport Canada will enforce that, so he gave $37 million for 3 years. So I believe that for Trudeau, that restriction will be there for 3 years. But we can have a good news, because myself and former Premier Brian Petford from Newfoundland, we are suing the federal government, the Trudeau's government, because it is our constitutional right to be able to travel freely across our country. And in Canada, right now, Canada is the only country on the planet that does not allow their citizens that decided not to take the 2 shots to travel by plane, by train, or by boat. It's a huge discrimination. You don't see that anywhere in the world. So, and we will have our first hearing the first week of September. And if we have a good judge, I believe that we must win that, because it's written in the Constitution that every Canadian has a right, the right to travel across the country freely, to move across the country freely. And if we don't win, we will appeal that up to the Supreme Court of Canada. And just for give you an example, you said, as a leader of a national party, I'm the only one that cannot travel across the country by plane, and I'm living in Montreal. And so we decided to do a trip here in Atlantic Canada, except Newfoundland, because I cannot go there. And it will be a three weeks road trip. But it would be very difficult for me to go to Western Canada, to BC, to Alberta, and that's my role as the leader of a national political party, to be on the ground, to meet our people, to build our organization all across the country. And that's what we are doing here in Atlantic Canada. The goal is to be with our people, building the riding associations, and finding our candidates to be ready for the next election. So it's a huge discrimination. It's unfair for me. All these establishment politicians, leaders, they can travel, they can buy plane, and for me, I cannot, because I decided freely not to take it, not to take the 2 shots. So that's a big battle, and I hope that we'll be able to be successful, but I'm not alone. And if we win that case, that won't be not only for me and Brian Petford, it will apply for everybody. So maybe we won't have to wait 3 years to regain our freedoms in this country if we win that case in September. I believe that we'll have a decision maybe early January 2023. I hope. We'll see.
I hope so too, for my sake as well as everybody else's. Because if one person's rights are violated, everybody's rights are violated. I noticed that in the conversation you had with Premier Peckford, he started off by saying that he really enjoyed the fact that you said something to the effect of it's not necessarily the Constitution or the Charter of Rights that's in question, it's the people who are interpreting it, the people who are applying the law. And I'm reminded of the fact, and people should know, that Communist China has effectively a Bill of Rights, not too dissimilar from our own.
Yeah.
But you know that is a tyrannical dictatorship that particular party has killed 60 million of its own people, the same party that's now in power. Yeah. So it's about the people. Do you have much hope then that the people of this country, from which the pool of lawyers come from, judges come from, politicians come from, the people, what is the mood of the people, and are we inclined to agree with you that we have inalienable rights that somebody like a Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh should not violate?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and you're right by saying we have a great constitution, a charter of rights, and so the challenge that we have, and it's our politicians. Our politicians don't respect our constitution. So if we want changes in this country, if we want bold reforms, we need to have we need to say no to these establishment politicians and put people in place that will respect the fundamental law of the land, our constitution, our rights, and that's the big battle. So that's why I'm saying to people when I'm doing rallies, and I said, we need to have an ideological revolution. People must understand that you may have the best document, but if you have the wrong people in power, in government, they won't respect your rights like they did the last 2 years here in Canada. So we need to have that reform. We need to have that revolution. And you don't need to have 50% of the population on your side to win that battle of ideas. We are maybe a minority right now, but that's growing. I believe that now the fear, the propaganda during COVID-19 hysteria the last 2 years was very efficient. The federal government and the provincial governments spend a lot of money advertising, and so they were able to manipulate the population about COVID-19 when we know that that virus was not very dangerous for younger people without any comorbidities. And as you know, for the first time in the history, we locked down people, healthy people in Canada to fight a virus. So I believe that more people now, the time is on our side. More people understand that because, they had COVID or they know somebody that had COVID, and they know that, they didn't die from COVID if they're in shape and if they're young. And for a lot of people, that was a very bad flu or something like that. So, and now they can understand why did they do all that propaganda and lockdowns and stay-at-home order and curfews the last 2 years. So if they try to do that again next fall or next winter, I believe that more people will say, no, not for me, well, not for that, and our movement will grow. So if we want changes, we need to vote for what we believe. And if you don't vote for what you believe, don't expect to have the result that you wish. You may not have it. And so we at the People's Party, our job is to speak about our principles, our values, the values based on the Western civilization values and family values, with our 4 principles that are the basic of this party: individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. And we won't do any compromise with our principles. That's different from the establishment politicians. What they will do, they will tell you what you want to hear today, and maybe they will do the opposite when they'll be in government. For me, we are saying the same thing. We have a strong platform, and we won't change. And we are growing from 0% in 2018 when we created the party. Our first election in 2019, 1.5%. And I must say that it took 15 years for the Green Party of Canada to have more than 1.5% of the vote, and we did that at our first election. And after that, the last one, last September, we had 5% of the vote, and the Green Party had 2%. So I believe that we will grow, and at the next election, we will have our voice in Parliament, and we'll start that ideological revolution. So I'm optimistic that we are able to win that battle, because I believe that the truth, based on facts and the common sense, will always prevail. It's a question of time.
Right. Now, as important as the situation here is in Canada right now and the pandemic, I can't let this opportunity go by, because you were Canada's Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Yeah.
You were the chairman of the Committee on National Defence,
Yeah.
which oversees all aspects of the armed forces and national defense in this country. So I want your opinion, if you could, Maxime, on the current jingoistic nature, belligerent rhetoric that's coming from Ottawa, from Brussels, from Washington, regarding the conflict in Ukraine. I can't believe it myself that nobody's asking for negotiations. Yes. They're all gung-ho, and that phrase is totally appropriate if people want to look up gung-ho, about going to war with the nuclear Russia. I can't believe what's going on. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And, that war is a humanitarian disaster for both sides. We must look at history before. And, in the 1960s, Kennedy was the president of the United States, and we had the Soviet at that time that wanted to have missiles in Cuba. And Kennedy said, no way, I won't allow you to put your Soviet base in Cuba at my doors. And that was a big conflict at that time. And they were able to solve that by negotiation. And in the end, the Soviet didn't put any missiles in Cuba. And a little bit later, we had the Cold War. And as you know, we created NATO to protect North America. That was the goal of NATO. And we had an agreement with the Soviet at that time. When I'm saying we, the West, we had an agreement, and we said, we won't do any expansion with NATO. NATO is there to protect North America. But we didn't respect what we told them at that time, and we had a lot of expansion of NATO in Europe, France, Germany, and other countries. And now, the last maybe 5 years, we push Ukraine and ask Ukraine, you can ask to be part of NATO, and we'll look at it. And so Putin and Russia said, no, I don't want a NATO base at my doors, like Kennedy didn't want that. But we didn't listen to him, And Ukraine is not part of NATO right now, but maybe in the near future it will be a part of NATO, but that will be a disaster. And Putin was asking, before engaging in a war against Ukraine, one of his conditions was, I want to be sure, tell me that Ukraine won't be part of NATO and you won't put any NATO base in Ukraine. And we didn't want to have that discussion with him. And so, I don't agree with what Putin did. Putin is a murderer, a dictator, and I'm not pro-Putin, and I'm pro-peace and prosperity. So we must be able to have that discussion, and we must be able to have a diplomatic solution. The risks are too high. We can have another world war, and here in Canada, we have a government that is, pro-Ukraine and giving money to Ukraine and equipment. First of all, we are broke. We don't have any money. We have huge deficit. We must help Canadians first, and we must promote peace and prosperity instead of and trying to put these two parties at the same table and starting these negotiations. It's too bad that now, this conflict after 2 months, more than 2 months, it's still a huge conflict. And, I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like what I'm seeing because, you don't know what can happen with that escalation. And every day you have something new instead of having negotiation. So, but you cannot speak about that in Canada. You cannot have that position in Canada. I'll give you an example. I did an interview with the Journal de Montréal, a French interview, in the beginning of that war. And because of that position, they tried to put me in a corner and saying the PPC and Bernier is pro-Putin. And I did that interview for 20 minutes. And I answered all these questions, and I told him what I'm telling you right now, that I'm not pro-Putin. We need to know our history, and we need to put everything in perspective. And so I believe that I did a very good interview because they didn't print it. They didn't print it because it was not in the narrative. Mm-hmm. They wanted to say Bernier is a crazy leader, pro-Putin. But what I said during the interview was normal logic based on history, and he was not able to do a piece like that, so they decided not to publish it. So you cannot have another position than the narrative in Canada. It's very difficult. But we, the People's Party, we are telling the truth, and I believe that we have a vision for this country, a smaller government in Ottawa that will respect people, respect our Constitution, but also it's not our war. Don't interfere in other conflict. We're not, we cannot be part of that. We have a small Canadian forces, and that's not our role. Our role of Canadian forces must be there to defend our country and part of NATO, but not being part of that war. It's not our business.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we've often involved ourselves in conflicts, for example, in Africa, under the United Nations Responsibility to Protect, R2P, where it's justified, apparently, for the United Nations to say that we should invade this country because of the humanitarian issues that are going on in that place, right? The persecution or the murder of certain people. And there's an argument to be said for that. However, that argument seems to fall down when Putin is claiming to do the exact same thing for the Russians in the Donbass oblasts. I mean, these are ethnic Russians, just like in Sevastopol or Crimea, who voted, whether that's a legitimate vote or not, to join Russia, to rejoin Russia. And so what's sauce for the goose doesn't seem to be sauce for the gander, because Putin is saying, look, Ukraine, Zelensky is murdering the Azov battalion, murdering ethnic Russians in the Donbass, and we're just going to make sure that they have autonomy,
Yeah.
right? Now, I'm, again, like yourself, I am not defending Putin.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy
Yeah.
where we can do something, mind you, we're a freer society than Russia, but Russia cannot. Does that fit in with what you're saying as well?
Yeah, absolutely. What was good for us in the 1960s, and the Soviet being sure that they won't have a base in Cuba, and the Soviet decided, okay, I think you're right, we won't put any Soviet base in Cuba at the doors of the U.S. Now it's not for Putin. No, we don't follow that. He's asking for the same thing that Kennedy was asking, and we won't give him what he wants. I think it's a mistake there. We can start the negotiation by putting that on the table and say, okay, let's have a discussion about the role of NATO and the implication of all that. But we don't do that. It's insane.
Just to change gears for a moment, and going back to the Emergencies Act and its invocation by Trudeau government, Trudeau-Singh government. And I think we should say that from now on, the Trudeau-Singh government, because they are in lockstep with each
Absolutely,
other.
yeah.
And that is the Senate. Now, you were part of the Harper government. Harper government of Conservative Party was created out of the Canadian Alliance, of which I ran as a member.
Yeah.
The Reform Party with Preston Manning.
Yeah.
And part of that was the West wants in with a triple E Senate, equal, elected, and effective.
Yeah.
What we just saw, and a lot of people may not realize, but I hope they go online and look at some of the debate, it's about 15-hour debate in the Senate, when they were poised to defeat Trudeau's implementation of the Emergencies Act. The Prime Minister's office started to poll senators, and we have this from senators actually saying, yes, we got a call from the PMO. How are you voting? And when it was revealed that the vote was probably going to go to not implement the Emergencies Act or to revoke it in the Senate, Trudeau said, nip it in the bud, stop the debate, I'm going to revoke it myself. Here we have a Senate not elected, but appointed by elected officials, just as Supreme Court judges, justices are, just as heads of departments are, and ministries and not ministries or agencies. Nothing stops them from doing their job. We have, it is equal in, from regional point of view, 24 senators from each region, 6 from Newfoundland, that kind of a thing. And it's effective in the Constitution. It has powers. It has powers, but they don't use them. Your thoughts on a Triple E Senate and the one we have today?
First of all, it would be very difficult to implement a Triple E Senate because of Quebec, that I believe that Quebec will always say no. And with the Constitutional Act, you will need the approval of Quebec to change that Senate. So that being said, I understand that the Senate has a role. And I'm very happy with what they did because of these senators. They decided no, that the Emergencies Act must not be enforced, and they did great for the country, and they did great for our freedoms and our rights. So I believe that you must reforming the Senate will be very difficult. So as a leader of a national political party, I believe that we have other bold reforms that we must do before that. And I don't want to reopen the Constitution. I want the federal government to respect the Constitution first, respect our rights. And yes, if I'm Prime Minister, or when I'll be Prime Minister, we will use the power of the Prime Minister to put in place good senators that understand their role. And yes, they must be there to fact check what the House of Commons is doing. And they did their job with the Emergencies Act. And we must thank them for that. So answering your question, we don't have in our platform a Senate reform, but we will have in our platform an electoral reform. I believe that, like I said, with 5% of the vote, and 850,000 people that voted for us. If we had a proportional system, I believe that we would have maybe 15 to 20 candidates, People's Party candidates in the House. So I think we need to have a kind of a mixed system. I like our tradition, I like our parliamentary system, but we can add something, a portion of proportionality. We are looking at it right now. I think that will be a good system, that will be fair for everybody. And we don't need to change the Constitution for that. So that can be a way for our democracy to be more efficient. Or like now, you can be a prime minister without having the majority of the votes.
Yes, Trudeau got 20.5% of the Trudeau Liberals got 20.5% of eligible voters.
Yeah.
And the only people who ever saw Justin Trudeau on the ballot was the people in Papineau, Montreal. So again, like you, I don't necessarily object to our parliamentary democracy.
Yeah.
It's worked well in Britain for 1,000 years, so I'm not opposed to it. Like you and Brian Peckford said, it's the people.
Yeah.
It's not the institutions per se, though they could use some tweaking.
Yeah.
The media. The other day was International, what was it called? Journalism Day, Free Press Day, something like that.
Yeah.
And Trudeau, of course, gets out there and bills himself as a champion of free press because we need you to tell the truth and stop misinformation. My bugaboo, and I did a video with our good friend Salim Mansour when it came out, giving, I think it was $260 million to favored press, approved by a Liberal committee, or a government committee made up of Liberals, to get this money. They are paid by the state. They are no longer journalists, in my opinion. They are propagandists. They are spokesmen for the government.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
First of all, yes, I'm opposed to the CBC. The federal government is giving $1.3 billion to the CBC, and we are broke. So we must end that. Defund, not the police, defund the CBC. We'll save money, that will help us to balance the budget. But you're right by saying that Justin Trudeau put a fund of money, I think it was $500 million or a little bit more, I don't remember the amount, to the legacy media, the mainstream media, CTV, Global, the Global Mail, and we want the government we want the media, to be independent, not dependent on the government. They are dependent right now. And you're right, when you receive money from the government, you're not objective anymore. And during that pandemic, we saw it. The propaganda was everywhere, in every newspaper, every radio station. And add to that the advertising budget from the federal government. In Quebec, for example, the Quebec government, because a radio station in Quebec that is independent decided to have a position that is the opposite of the Quebec one on COVID-19 and the COVID hysteria. And they were, very arguing against what the government was doing, against all these mandates. And the Quebec government said, okay, all our ad, we won't put any ad at your radio station. And that's a lot of money. So the radio station said, okay, I'm okay with that. I'll do my job. My job is I have a vision of this country, and I don't believe with mandates and mandatory vaccine passport and all that. But after 6 months, the radio station changed a little bit, more pro-government, and hopes they received the funding from the government by a big ad budget. So that's a real influence. So the government must not give any money to these media. They must be independent. And if they're good, they will be able to raise money from their viewers, like the independent, alternative independent media that we have in this country. So it's the media were, during the pandemic, the propaganda arms of the government. You're absolutely right about it. And for us, we want to cut all these funding to the media. And yes, if the CBC is going bankrupt, that's it. That will be it. If they want to be to stay alive, they will have to raise money from their viewers. And if the viewers don't like what they're saying, they won't receive any money and they go bankrupt. That's what is happening in a free society, free market. And for what the Trudeau is doing right now is controlling the media. And that's why you had about 70% of the population, 40% of the population who agree with the government on COVID-19, because all these ads and propaganda and money and the federal government and provincial governments were controlling the media. So when that happened, we are not in a democracy anymore.
No, we've lost the fourth estate.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's now part of the government.
Yeah,
it is a propaganda arm. I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
Finally, Celine.
Maxime.
Celine. I did that on another video as well. I called you Celine. I don't know why that is.
No, because you have a good relationship with him. And as you know, speaking about Salim was one of our candidates at our first election in 2019. And, and also he helped us to build our platform. And he's still helping me, and I appreciate, he's a great intellectual,
he is.
Great Canadian, and I'm very pleased that he's supporting us.
So am I. But finally, Maxime, doing politics differently. Your book, you published chapter 5 in your book about the dairy cartel.
Yeah.
And it got you in a little bit of a hot water with your your party. And
at that time. Yeah.
At that time. Now that time has passed, can we look forward to the publishing of your book, Doing Politics Differently?
Yes, thank you very much for asking. Yes, I decided to publish that first chapter when I was a conservative. It was too important for the debate in our society. And so what I did after that, we developed a platform. At that time, I was running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada in 2019, and we developed a platform based on 4 principles, like I said before: individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And that platform was very popular. I didn't win with 49% of the vote. So after that, I said, and it's still the reality. The Conservative Party of Canada is intellectually and morally corrupt. They are not conservative anymore. They're just conservative in name. So we created the PPC based on that platform. Answering your question about that. So for me, my vision of the country and doing politics differently, it is the PPC platform. So what we will do, we are actually in the process right now to update our platform. And yes, we're going to maybe put that platform in a little book, but that won't be the book that I thought at that time, because we created the party, the ideas, all that. My vision of this country is all in our platform. The PPC people can go and read it at peoplespartyofcanada.ca and read our platform. So we'll put all our policies and ideas together. That won't be a formal book, but that will be the why, when I'm saying that we are doing politics differently, when people will read that, they're going to see that we are doing politics differently without doing any survey and polling. If it's not popular, what I'm saying right now, I won't change, because I believe that we have the right ideas and the right policies for a freer and a more prosperous country. And the more I speak about it openly with passion and conviction, the more people will support us. And actually, it happened. 0%, 1.5%, 5%, and maybe the next election, I don't know, 10, 15, I don't know what will happen. But that's why I'm saying we are doing politics differently. We're not looking at the polling and survey and, okay, this is important this week, we're going to say that, and next week we're going to say other things. No, we believe that we have a strong vision and we must explain that to the population. And the more we do that, the better it will be for our country and the more support we will have. So I won't finish that book, but I will put together all our policies that we have on our website in a kind of a booklet or pamphlet or something like that, or maybe a little book, I don't know. And we'll do that this year, sorry.
Maxime, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for that opportunity. I'm very pleased, and I hope that we'll have another opportunity to be together and have another discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.